tarpaulin flaps are buttoned down on the windows of the state transport bus all the way up to Jeju. A cold wind keeps sweeping and slapping a corner of the tarpaulin at your elbow. You look down the roaring road. You search for signs of daybreak in what little light spills out of the bus. Your own divided face in a pair of glasses on an old man's nose is all the countryside you get to see. And then you seem to move continually forward toward a destination. And to represent the destination, it has been pointed out, it is just beyond the cast mark between the eyebrows. So fundamentally, as I've already mentioned, that in the last stanza that we have completed in our last class, there was a particular reference to some ironic resurgence. I have mentioned about that. It was there that your own divided face in a pair of glasses on an old man's nose is all the countryside you get to see. So here you have found the particular reference to the ironic orientation. You expected to look at the countryside just through the window, but in the place of window, in the place of the countryside, you just see the face that is in front or sitting in front of you, and ultimately you are seeing or watching your own face in a divided condition that got reflected from the pair of glasses that the old man is wearing on his nose. There, the particular reference to the ironic orientation is very much, it is very much visible, to be specific. And now you will find it says that you seem to move continually forward. So this is obviously, as I mentioned, that so far as the literal perspectives are concerned, we find that somehow the particular kind of a journey that the text is actually operating, it is indicating towards the journey that have been committed by the bus. So therefore, the journey, the movement, the association of movement, something related to that movement, the reference to destination, the reference to the speed, okay, everything is repeatedly being pointed out. It says you seem to move continually forward, okay, towards a destination. Now, I should point here that the particular term forward, the particular term like progress, here the term forward is pointed or is being used to refer to move forward. That can also refer, or that can also mean the particular term progress. Now the question is, in a typical society, okay, or when you will find that Arun Kolatkar is writing this particular poem, you will find certainly that that there are people who are present there. They're completely blind to their religion, to their religious dogmas, to their religious superstitions, and somehow the different kind of the kind of difference that is being pointed throughout this particular poem, it actually gives us a kind of a hint that somehow the poet doesn't believe the superstitious rites and rituals that have been performed by these people. That means the people from the Thanga community. So that's why there might be a particular ironic orientation to the term forward. The question is it a kind of a progression or rather a regression? Is it a kind of an advancement or rather it is something that is lacking actually? It is moving forward or rather it is moving backward. So fundamentally, though you will find that the bus is gradually moving forward, or rather you will find it is not simply the bus, rather the passengers who are present there, it has been stated that we are continuously moving forward, but literally it is as it has been pointing out that the bus is generally moving towards Jeju. But you can identify that somehow an alternative orientation of this particular reference, of this syntax, actually gives us the hint that although we are moving forward visible in a visible form, but ultimately you will find that so far as the concept of societal progress, advancement of the psychological orientations and the lifestyle, it is not a kind of a progression to be forward, or it's not a kind of a journey that is moving towards the forward sections, but rather it is indicating towards something backward, therefore. But so far as the literal orientation is concerned, you will find that no, it is referring to that, yes, it is moving forward towards a kind of destination. The destination means the place actually where they are actually moving. It's the particular temple of Lord Shiva, or Malhari Martand, as I mentioned last day. So therefore it is stating that you seem to move continually forward towards a destination. You seem, remember, the term seem is actually positing a kind of doubt, a kind of interrogation is obviously being presented here. Not in a literal form, not in an explicit way, that is implicit way or oblique way. And then it says, again the ironic orientation has been incorporated. It says that just beyond the caste mark. So generally you will identify that what is happening there. If you find that in these places, in the Marathi community or maybe in other communities that we find in different parts of India, we find the kind of markings, the markings on your forehead, just between the eyebrows or something. These markings are to some extent pointing towards the different kinds of customers. In some particular community, you will find that the markings are horizontal. In some places, these are vertical. In some places, or in some community, you will find a single mark is there. In some cases, there are double marks. In some cases, there is double marks, in a horizontal form. And in some cases, you will find the triple marks in there. So different kinds of markings are to some extent symbolically they are representing different different caste marks actually. Okay, so what the poet is actually referring to, that you seem to move continually forward toward a destination, and that very much destination that have been pointed out, it is just beyond the caste mark of between his eyebrows. Literally it is pointing towards the person who is sitting there, or maybe the other persons who are the pilgrims who are being engaged in such a kind of a journey. But fundamentally you will find that the poet symbolically and at the same time ironically, he is presenting the particular destination. Just think about that whenever you are thinking about something spiritual, you will find that it is not to be encircled within the particular structure of casteism and something like that. You cannot say that we have the monopoly. Okay, that means this is our God. This is not the God of any other community because it is ours. You can't say that. So therefore, the destination is probably beyond the caste mark between his eyebrows. So though you can find the dogmas, though you can find some restrictions, though you can find some monopoly orientations, but ultimately you will find somehow that so far as the destination is concerned, you will find that in spite of the differences, okay, in terms of your religion, in terms of your religious dogmas, in terms of the Brahmanism or something like that, but fundamentally you will find that the destination is obviously positing something extra. It is just beyond the caste mark between his eyebrows. So it is not simply the visible terms that is being operated in the face of you, but at the same time you will find that this is also encapsulating something extra, you see. But the ironic orientation is always there. That means though it is signifying something positive, but at the same time you will find that no, it is not literally positive, rather the negative orientations that are present within the concepts or within these people, these are also being pointed out by the poet here. Then what happens, in a most dramatic way, it has been pointed out that outside, that means outside means, just beyond the bus or outside of the bus, the sun has risen quietly. Okay, so fundamentally it was the kind of a night being incorporated, being pointed out by the poet from the very beginning. It was the obvious formation of darkness that was there, and the whole night the journey was continuing. And now he is stating that outside the sun has risen quietly. almost quietly. You see that it is not a kind of an thing to be specific, with powerful presence or something, with the hustle bustle, with the crowd being outside. So it's not like that. It's a quiet orientation of the sun. The sun has risen quietly. Okay, and then what happens? Literally, you will find that the person, or maybe the person who has been mentioned beforehand, the person with the spectacles on his nose, you will find that somehow a streak of light is coming from outside and it is just falling on his eyes. So therefore, it has been pointed out here. It says that outside the sun has risen quietly. It aims through an eyelet in the tarpaulin. So therefore, you will find that in midst of the darkness, in midst of the complete darkness, and as I've already mentioned, that this darkness is obviously symbolic. The typically covered orientation is obviously symbolic. It is the claustrophobic orientation of religion being incorporated, and now the outside world and the sunrise, everything is something positive. It's a kind of a public symbol, as you know. It is not something private. So ultimately, you will find that the sunrise is actually literally indicating, it is something positive. So with the sunrise, with the dawn, actually, you will find some positivity, some outside world. It is actually infiltrating into the darkness. It is coming into the darkness. So the intervening of the outside world is pointed out here. Therefore, it has been stated that outside the sun has risen quietly. It aims through an eyelet. Eyelet, a small gap actually. So from it, the outside sunlight, sun rays are coming into the bus. Okay, in the complete darkness of the bus. So therefore, it aims through an eyelet in the tarpaulin, and then what happens? And shoots at the old man's glasses. Almost dramatic way, you see. The person who is sitting just in front of you, and you are to some extent criticizing the man just because of his temperament, just because of his ignorance, just because of his superstitions and something. And now the ray of positivity in the formation of the sunlight, just like, a kind of light of wisdom, it is as if it is coming through the eyelet in the tarpaulin. And it is now falling on the man's glasses. Glass is very significant, you see, because whenever you will find the glass is very symbolic way, in a symbolic way it has been represented in plays, in poems, because glass actually represents the way you look at something. Okay, so when the sunlight is just falling on the glasses, does it signify that some ray of positivity, some improvement, the real improvement? It is not the simple verbal improvement and verbal progression or something. Rather, you will find some improving light, the light of knowledge, the light of wisdom. It is coming from outside world. It is intervening into the darkness of the society, being represented by the covered situation, the tarpaulin covered situation of the bus and so. And now it is falling on the old man's glasses. So what should you expect here? What would happen? Okay, probably we will feel that, okay, the way the people were looking, the way the pilgrims are looking, when the sunlight is falling there, symbolically it is pointing out towards something positive, and the people who are superstitious, who are blind almost, they will find something positive, and therefore they will look at the things from a different angle. These are our expectations, but ultimately it will not happen. Okay, you will find that the people who are completely different from the poet and the poet's temperament, you will find that this is not going to happen. You will find that particular thing, you see, it's just like Jagoddal Patho. It cannot be changed. It cannot be, it can be reformed. Therefore, it's failure. Obviously, you will find. But the poet, actually, at the very end of this particular poem, the poet is pointing that I cannot change anything. I cannot move into the old man's head. I cannot change his thoughts. Okay, so there lies the problem, obviously. And that's why he says that outside the sun has risen quietly or risen quietly. It aims through an eyelet in the tarpaulin and shoots at the old man's glasses. A sword of sunbeam, okay, comes to a rest gently against the driver's right temple. It is obviously symbolic orientation is there. Because as you can find that the journey is almost towards the end, and a kind of the streak of light again, the sword of sunbeam, as if pichle esheche arki. So a sword of sunbeam, it comes to a rest gently against the driver's right temple. You know what is temple? It is not the temple that we can find in Jejuri. The temple is that particular portion. You see, just the two sections. These are called the temples. Okay, just the two sides of your forehead. So what happens? The driver who is actually driving the bus is symbolic as you mentioned. So he's the driver of the bus. So naturally, you will find that he's giving the destination, giving the direction, he's giving the speed. So that's why the person is very important because to some extent he has this. He's actually steering the bus towards his destination. So fundamentally, what happens, you know, that just like the streak of light that is coming from the eye of the tarpaulin and it falls on the old man's glasses. Likewise, you will find the sword of sunbeam comes to rest gently against the driver's right temple. Okay, it is coming there. Okay, it's falling on this temple. The bus now, so ultimately it is now changing direction. So this change direction is obviously referring to something extra. Literally, it is pointing out, you see, that somehow it is pointing out that okay, now it is the time to change the direction. That is the direction they were following. Probably they were on the high road and they are moving in the same direction from north to south or south to north or maybe east to west or anything else. But now they are changing direction because they have to move towards the temple. So therefore, from the main road, they are actually being swayed. They are taking the different path and that now it's changing direction. But literally, what I'm trying to suggest is that apart from the literal orientation of this particular reference, that means when the bus is changing the direction and again coming to the temple of the Malhari Merchant, but rather you will find that if it is to be considered as a kind of a journey, and as I've already mentioned that these are indicating the different kinds of orientation to the society and at the same time the religious discourse and superstition and how the poet cannot feel himself, you know, as a part of this society and culture. Now when the bus is changing direction, the direction change is obviously symbolically orienting to something extra, you see. That means the way they actually feel, now the direction has been changed, okay? And this will be discussed in the last few lines. It says, the bus seems to change directions from its actual way towards something extra, something in a different way. At the end of the bumpy ride, so now it begins to, the ride becomes problematic here. And it says, therefore, now it is the bumpy ride. Beforehand, it was not so because it was on the high road. And at the end of the bumpy ride, with your own face on either side, so that's very significant, you see. It says at the end of the bumpy ride, with your own face at either side, on either side, when you get off the bus, so ultimately, why either side? Because that's because of the jerking that you have faced. So you can find yourself here and now there, and you know the kind of problematic situation actually aroused. So therefore, you will find that somehow it says that the bumpy ride was there. So why it is bumpy ride? It is also symbolically representing the different kinds of obstacles that you have faced regarding your own thought processes. You see what happens, you have only your own ideology, you have your own ethics, if you have your own philosophy of life and everything, you see, whether it's the spiritual doctrines, different kind of doctrines that you are following, or maybe some philosophical appeal that you have, or maybe the psychological, some associations with some spiritual. Probably you have all these things, and you will find that whenever you are in the society, various kinds of problems and various kinds of obstacles are always there. You see. The obstacles, problems, familial, societal, religious. So it's not a kind of a very soothing journey, as you see, the bumpy ride that it actually points out. This is actually providing some problems that you are facing within your mind. Okay, it's not simply the physical pain or physical suffering, which is obviously literal. But at the same time, in a symbolic and subliteral angle, you can find it's also indicating towards something problematic that is happening to your inner psyche. Okay, and then it says that your face on either side, you can find that this either side, this particular reference, can also be related, can also be associated with you know, the kind of tussle that is going on within your mind. When it is the face on either side, that means it's a kind of a conflict that is going on. So just you are thinking at this very moment, I have tried to change everything. I have tried to feel different. I have tried to, you know, educate those personalities. I have tried to change. because I always found that somehow these people, they're belonging to any particular community, they're belonging to any particular culture, they're superstitious, their thought processes are not correct according to you. And now you are trying to, or you have tried to change the temperament, change their mind, change their belief, change their superstition. But somehow, that's why at the same time, you will find that somehow a kind of an inner conflict is going on within you. And that's why the either side, these are pointing, these are providing some extra emphasis on the particular formation of conflict, the to be or not to be crisis. And at the same time, you will find that you can find, okay, uh, I am facing that one, I'm facing this one. So which way should I think about? And what happens, ultimately, after the repeated tryings and repeated conflicts and repeated problems that you have faced within your mind, ultimately you get off the bus, okay, because the destination achieved, the quote-unquote destination, and you get off the bus. And then the last line is very striking, actually. Here it says that you don't step inside the old man's head. Literally, you will find that you cannot know what the person is facing, actually, or what the person is actually feeling or maybe thinking, because you do not have any key, actually. Okay, with the help of key, you can unlock his heart or unlock his mind, unlock his head. So you don't know. You do not have that particular capability or ability to look into the mind, to look into the head of this man. So literally what happens, it says that you don't stay inside the old man's head. Literally it is continuing, it's stating that, the companion remains unknown, and, you have been isolated from the entity of the traveler. Okay. So generally you cannot make yourself feel that I have been transformed from a journalist to a pilgrim, or maybe from a tourist to a pilgrim. It's not happening. So the kind of alienation, whether cultural, whether religious, or maybe intellectual, so it continued, and ultimately you cannot enter inside the old man's head. You cannot change his thought. You failed. It's a failure. You cannot change his mind. You cannot just change his the thought process or maybe the superstition. So ultimately, in spite of the different kinds of orientations to cope up with the situation, to be like them, or maybe to change themselves according to your own mind, own thought process, own ideology, but ultimately it will not happen. So therefore, at the very end of this particular section of the poem, or maybe the bar section, so you find somehow that the distanciation was there, the separation was there, the aloofness was there, the alienation was there. So fundamentally, you cannot change anything. You cannot become one of them, or you cannot change them according to your own will. That is the fundamental thing. That's why he no longer remains the pilgrim. Rather, he becomes a professional journalist who is actually from a distant point of view, and who is trying to read something. But ultimately, in that particular process of reading, is obviously there some problems actually aroused.